Some people just aren't cut out for success. My name is Noah. I'm 35, work at Suncaster Bioworks in Denver, Colorado, and I brought my 5-year-old son Tyler to what I thought would be a nice family picnic. Instead, I watched my boss Harrison Webb destroy me in front of 50 families while Tyler tugged on my shirt, asking why everyone was staring at us. The company retreat was supposed to be relaxing. Lake views, barbecue, kids running around with their parents. I'd been looking forward to it for weeks. Tyler had been asking when he could see where Daddy worked. This seemed perfect. Harrison had other plans. He stood up during lunch, grabbed the microphone like he was about to make some cheerful announcement about employee appreciation. Instead, he launched into a detailed breakdown of my performance issues, while families stopped eating to listen. Noah here has been with us for 8 years, Harrison said, his voice carrying across the lakeside pavilion. 8 years of missed deadlines, confused priorities, and frankly, incompetence that's cost this company thousands. Tyler looked up at me with those wide brown eyes. Daddy, why is that man saying mean things about you? I couldn't answer. Harrison wasn't done. I've tried coaching him, mentoring him, giving him easier projects. Nothing works. Some people just aren't cut out for success in the biotech industry. The silence afterward was deafening. Forks stopped moving. Kids stopped playing. Even the lake seemed quieter. Harrison smiled at me across the pavilion. Not a friendly smile. The kind of smile that said he'd been planning this moment for weeks. Tyler pulled on my sleeve again. Why did he do that to you, Dad? I looked straight at Harrison's smug face and said, loud enough for him to hear, I don't know, son, but I'll find out and he will pay. Harrison's smile widened. He thought I was just talking tough for my kid's benefit. He had no idea I meant every word. The rest of the picnic was torture. Other parents avoided eye contact. Their kids whispered and pointed. Tyler stayed close to my leg, confused but loyal. I packed up our things while Harrison worked the crowd, shaking hands and laughing like he'd just delivered the keynote at a leadership conference. He'd humiliated me deliberately, publicly in front of my son. That wasn't performance management. That was personal. Driving home, Tyler fell asleep in his car seat. I kept replaying Harrison's words, his timing, his satisfaction. 8 years I'd worked for this man. 8 years of late nights, weekend calls, covering for his mistakes when board meetings went wrong. Something was off about the whole thing. Harrison didn't just dislike me. He needed me gone. The question was why. I joined Suncaster straight out of college, eager to make my mark in biotechnology. Harrison hired me himself, praised my analytical skills, my attention to detail. For the first few years, we worked well together. He relied on me to clean up his presentations, double-check his numbers, make sure regulatory filings were accurate. Tyler's mom left when he was 2. Couldn't handle being married to someone who worked 60-hour weeks for a biotech startup. That's when Harrison became more than just a boss. He offered flexible hours, let me work from home when Tyler was sick, even helped cover daycare costs during the divorce proceedings. Family first, he used to say. We take care of our own here. But things started changing about 6 months ago. Harrison became distant, critical. Projects I'd completed successfully for years suddenly had problems. Budgets I'd managed carefully were somehow over target. Vendor relationships I'd maintained for years were falling apart, according to Harrison. I'd started noticing other things too. New vendor accounts appearing in our system that I didn't recognize. Purchase orders for equipment we already owned. Harrison's sudden interest in personally approving all financial documentation. Just streamlining the process, he'd explained when I asked about the changes. Less bureaucracy, more efficiency. The warning signs were there, but I'd ignored them. Harrison had been good to me during the divorce. He'd mentored me, promoted me to senior project manager, increased my salary twice. I trusted him. That trust had been stupid. After the picnic, I started paying closer attention. Harrison would disappear for long lunch meetings with vendors I'd never heard of. He'd stay late, working on special projects that never seemed to materialize. Financial reports that used to cross my desk were now handled exclusively by his office. When I tried to access certain vendor files, I found my permissions had been changed. Security protocols, Harrison's assistant explained. Only department heads can access financial records now. But I still had access to the master database. I still reviewed purchase orders for approval. And I was starting to see patterns that didn't make sense. Equipment purchases from companies that didn't exist. Service contracts for maintenance we performed in-house. Consulting fees for projects that were never completed. Tyler asked me about the picnic for 3 days straight. "Are you in trouble at work, Daddy? Is that mean man going to fire you? Can we go to a different picnic next time?" I promised him everything would be okay. But I was beginning to understand that Harrison's public humiliation wasn't about my performance. It was about positioning. He needed me to look incompetent before something big happened. He was setting me up to take the fall for something. I just didn't know what yet. The realization hit me on Thursday evening while reviewing quarterly expense reports. I was working late, Tyler at my sister's house, trying to make sense of budget discrepancies Harrison had blamed on my sloppy bookkeeping. That's when I saw it. A payment to Kelmore and Finch Consulting for $47,000. The problem was, I knew every consulting firm we worked with. Kelmore and Finch didn't exist. I pulled up the vendor database, searched for their business license, their address. Nothing. The company was registered to a post office box in Aurora, Colorado. No website, no phone number, no employees listed in any professional directories. But the payment was real. Harrison had personally approved it 3 months ago. My hands were shaking as I searched for more phantom vendors. Norwell and Sons Equipment, Graveland Textiles Industrial, Thornmere Logistics, all fake companies, all receiving payments that Harrison had personally authorized. $47,000 here, $23,000 there, smaller amounts designed to stay under the radar, but when I added them up across 18 months, the total made my stomach drop. $800,000. Gone. I sat in my empty office, staring at the numbers on my screen. Harrison wasn't just embezzling money. He was systematically looting the company, creating fake vendors and pocketing the payments. And based on the pattern of his criticism over the past 6 months, he was planning to blame it all on me. The public humiliation at the picnic wasn't random cruelty. It was preparation. When the FBI investigation started, when auditors found the missing money, Harrison wanted everyone to remember that Noah was incompetent, unreliable, the obvious suspect. I thought about Tyler's questions. Why was he so mean to you, Daddy? Because he was planning to destroy my life to save his own. I made copies of everything. Bank statements, vendor records, approval signatures. Every piece of evidence that showed Harrison's personal involvement in creating and funding these phantom companies. Then I called my college roommate Jacob, who worked for the FBI's Financial Crimes Division in Denver. "I need to meet with you," I told him. "Tonight. And I need you to bring someone who specializes in corporate fraud." "Noah, what's going on?" "My boss has been embezzling money for almost 2 years, and he's setting me up to take the fall." The meeting lasted until 3 a.m. Jacob and Agent Patricia Morgan reviewed every document I'd brought, asked detailed questions about Harrison's access to accounts, his authority to approve payments, his recent behavior changes. "This is solid evidence," Agent Morgan said finally. "We'll need to move carefully, but you've done excellent work documenting the fraud. How long before you arrest him?" "Give us a week to set up surveillance, gather additional evidence. We want to catch him in the act, not just reviewing old records." I drove home as the sun came up, exhausted but determined. Harrison thought he was playing chess while I was playing checkers. He had no idea the game had already changed. Monday morning, Harrison called me into his office with his usual fake smile. "Noah, we need to discuss your future here at Suncaster." I sat across from his mahogany desk, looking at the man who'd been stealing from our company while planning to destroy my career. "What kind of discussion?" "Performance issues have been mounting. The board is asking questions about budget overruns in your department. I've been protecting you, but there are limits to what I can do." He opened a manila folder, pulled out documents I recognized immediately. Purchase orders, vendor payments, budget reports, all the evidence of his own embezzlement, but presented as if I were responsible. These discrepancies add up to significant money, Noah. Money that's missing from accounts you manage. I stared at him, amazed by his boldness. Those are your signatures on the approval forms, Harrison. Signatures can be forged, especially by someone with access to sensitive documents. He leaned back in his leather chair, completely confident. The board will want explanations, they'll want accountability. He was moving faster than I'd expected. Agent Morgan had asked for a week, but Harrison was implementing his frame-up immediately. What are you suggesting? Resignation. Clean, professional, no ugly investigations. I'll provide positive references, help you find another position. Your son's future doesn't have to suffer because of a few accounting mistakes. The threat was clear. Resign quietly or he'd destroy me publicly and legally. He'd use Tyler as leverage, ruin my reputation permanently. I need time to think about it. Of course. Take until Wednesday. But Noah? He smiled that cold smile again. Don't overthink this. Some battles aren't worth fighting. I left his office and immediately called Agent Morgan. He's accelerating the timeline. He wants my resignation by Wednesday. Perfect. That gives us exactly what we need. Keep acting normal, maybe even a little worried. Let him think his plan is working. Tuesday was torture. Harrison treated me like a condemned man getting his last meal. Friendly conversations about my future plans, helpful suggestions about career transitions, sympathetic comments about single parenting. It's tough raising a kid alone, he said during lunch. Financial pressure, time constraints. Sometimes we make poor decisions when we're desperate. I wanted to punch him. Instead, I nodded and played the part of a defeated employee accepting his fate. But Harrison wasn't content with psychological warfare. Tuesday afternoon, I discovered he'd locked me out of the financial systems entirely. Temporary security measure, his assistant explained, while the accounting review is ongoing. He was erasing my access to evidence, making it impossible for me to defend myself. If I hadn't already copied everything, his plan would have been perfect. Wednesday morning arrived with a phone call from Harrison. Noah, I'm afraid the board couldn't wait for your decision. There's going to be an emergency meeting at 10 a.m. You should probably bring a lawyer. What kind of meeting? The kind where serious accusations are discussed. The kind that end careers permanently if they're not handled carefully. I hung up and called Agent Morgan. They're moving now. Board meeting in 2 hours. We're ready. Harrison's meeting with one of his phantom vendors this morning. We've got surveillance teams positioned. Just keep him busy until 11 a.m. I arrived at the office to find Harrison pacing nervously, checking his phone every few minutes. He was scheduled to meet with representatives from Kelmore and Finch Consulting at 10:30 a.m. What he didn't know was that Kelmore and Finch was actually a bank account he'd created using false business registration documents. Nervous about the board meeting? I asked. Not nervous, just ready to get this unpleasant business behind us. He straightened his tie, grabbed his briefcase. They'll want your resignation letter, Noah. I'd write something graceful if I were you. He left for his meeting, confident that in 30 minutes he'd be collecting another fraudulent payment while I faced accusations of embezzlement. Agent Morgan had explained the plan. Harrison would drive to a coffee shop in Aurora, meet with an undercover agent posing as a vendor representative, and attempt to arrange another fake payment. Meanwhile, federal agents would be reviewing his computer, his bank accounts, his false vendor registrations. I sat in my office watching the clock, waiting for Harrison's world to collapse. At 11:15 a.m., Harrison returned from his meeting looking pleased with himself. He'd successfully arranged another $40,000 payment to his phantom consulting company, completely unaware that federal agents had recorded every word of the conversation. Ready for your board meeting? He asked, checking his watch. They're waiting in conference room A. I followed him down the hall, past colleagues who looked away uncomfortably. Word had spread about the accounting investigation involving Noah's department. Harrison had made sure everyone knew I was under suspicion. The board members were seated around the conference table. President Catherine Collins, Chief Financial Officer Vincent Torres, and 3 other executives I recognized but rarely interacted with. Harrison took his seat at the head of the table, opened his briefcase, and pulled out a thick folder. "Thank you all for making time for this difficult discussion," Harrison began. "As you know, we've discovered significant financial irregularities in our vendor payment system. Money that should have gone to legitimate contractors has been diverted to fraudulent accounts." Catherine Collins looked directly at me. "Noah, these are serious accusations. Do you understand the scope of what we're discussing?" Before I could answer, Harrison continued. $800,000 over 18 months. Payments to companies that don't exist. Approved through forged signatures covered up through manipulated budget reports. Vincent Torres frowned at the documents Harrison was distributing. "The evidence seems comprehensive. Noah, what's your response to these allegations?" I was about to speak when the conference room door opened. Agent Morgan walked in, followed by 2 other federal agents and Jacob from the FBI Financial Crimes Division. "Harrison Webb?" Agent Morgan displayed her badge. "Federal Bureau of Investigation. You're under arrest for embezzlement, wire fraud, and money laundering." The room went completely silent. Harrison's confident expression crumbled into confusion, then panic. "This is ridiculous," he stammered, looking around the table desperately. "Noah must have set me up. He's been stealing money and now he's trying to frame me." Agent Morgan approached Harrison calmly. "Stand up, please. Place your hands behind your back." "You don't understand," Harrison protested as the handcuffs clicked into place. "I was investigating the embezzlement. Noah has been creating fake vendor accounts, forging signatures. I have evidence." "We have evidence too," Agent Morgan replied. "Bank records showing deposits to accounts you opened personally. Video surveillance of you meeting with undercover agents this morning to arrange fraudulent payments. Computer records proving you created false business registrations for phantom companies." Catherine Collins stared at Harrison in shock. "You've been stealing from the company?" 2 years of systematic theft, Jacob explained to the board. Mr. Webb created 18 fake vendor companies, approved payments to accounts he controlled personally, and was preparing to frame Noah for his crimes. Harrison's face went white as the full scope of his situation became clear. "This can't be happening. I'm the CEO. I built this company." "You nearly destroyed it," Agent Morgan said. "Noah's investigation is the only reason we caught you before you disappeared with the money." Vincent Torres looked at me with newfound respect. "You've been working with the FBI?" "For the past week. Harrison tried to force my resignation yesterday, but federal agents needed time to gather evidence of his ongoing fraud." Harrison was escorted from the conference room in handcuffs, still protesting his innocence, still trying to blame me for his crimes. The board members sat in stunned silence, processing the revelation that their CEO had been looting the company while planning to destroy an innocent employee. Catherine Collins cleared her throat. "Noah, it appears we owe you a significant apology, and our gratitude. I thought about Tyler's question at the picnic. Why was he so mean to you, Daddy?" Now I had an answer that made sense. The next few days moved like a whirlwind. Federal agents seized Harrison's computers, bank records, and personal assets. The media picked up the story of a biotech CEO arrested for embezzling $800,000 from his own company. Catherine Collins called an emergency board meeting for Friday afternoon. I was asked to attend as a witness and victim of Harrison's fraud scheme. "The board has reviewed the FBI's evidence," Catherine announced. "Harrison Webb's embezzlement created a crisis of leadership at Suncaster Bioworks. His systematic theft and attempted frame-up of Noah represent the worst kind of corporate misconduct." Vincent Torres nodded grimly. "We're implementing immediate changes to our financial oversight systems. Every vendor payment will require dual approval. Every new vendor will be thoroughly vetted, and we're promoting Noah to Interim Chief Executive Officer, effective immediately." I stared at them in shock. "Interim CEO? You saved this company," Catherine said. "Your investigation prevented Harrison from stealing more money and potentially bankrupting us. The board believes you've earned the opportunity to lead Suncaster forward. The irony was overwhelming. Harrison's plan to destroy my career had resulted in me taking his job. His attempt to frame me for embezzlement had exposed his own crimes and elevated me to the position he'd tried to protect through fraud. That evening, I picked up Tyler from my sister's house and told him the news over dinner at his favorite restaurant. "So, the mean man from the picnic is in jail?" Tyler asked, carefully cutting his chicken strips. "Yes, buddy. He was stealing money from the company and trying to blame other people for his mistakes. And now you're the boss of the whole company?" "For now, yes. The people who own the company asked me to be in charge while they find a permanent replacement." Tyler grinned. "Does that mean you can fire mean people if they're not nice to kids?" I laughed, ruffling his hair. "It means I can make sure everyone at the company treats each other with respect." Over the weekend, more details about Harrison's crimes emerged. Federal investigators discovered he'd been planning to disappear with the stolen money, leaving Suncaster bankrupt and me facing criminal charges. His fake vendor scheme was sophisticated, involving false business registrations, fraudulent tax documents, and offshore bank accounts. His wife Diana filed for divorce on Monday, citing irreconcilable differences and criminal behavior. She was protecting herself and their 2 teenage children from the legal and financial consequences of Harrison's actions. The local business community was shocked by the scandal. Harrison had been respected, served on charity boards, spoke at business conferences about ethical leadership. His arrest made headlines in the Denver Business Journal, Colorado Public Radio, and even national financial news outlets. Tuesday morning, I walked into Harrison's former office, now my office, and found a letter from the federal prosecutor's office. Harrison was being charged with 18 counts of wire fraud, 12 counts of money laundering, and conspiracy to commit embezzlement. If convicted on all charges, he faced up to 25 years in federal prison. I called Agent Morgan to thank her for the investigation. What happens next? Harrison's lawyer is trying to negotiate a plea deal, but the evidence is overwhelming. He'll probably serve at least 10 years, pay full restitution, and never work in finance again. And the money he stole? We've frozen his assets, seized his house, his cars, his investment accounts. The company should recover most of the $800,000. I hung up the phone and looked out the window at downtown Denver. 2 weeks ago, Harrison had humiliated me at a company picnic. Today, he was facing decades in prison, while I was running the company he'd tried to destroy. 3 months later, Harrison's trial began in federal court. I was called as the primary witness for the prosecution, the employee whose investigation had exposed the entire fraud scheme. Harrison sat at the defendant's table, looking nothing like the confident CEO who'd humiliated me at the company picnic. His expensive suits had been replaced by an ill-fitting public defender's outfit. His usual arrogance had been replaced by nervous glances and whispered conversations with his lawyer. The prosecutor presented 18 months of evidence: fake vendor companies, forged documents, fraudulent payments, Harrison's personal bank accounts containing stolen money. The case was overwhelming. When I took the witness stand, Harrison wouldn't meet my eyes. The man who'd smiled triumphantly while destroying my reputation in front of 50 families couldn't look at the person who'd exposed his crimes. "Mr. Noah," the prosecutor asked, "when did you first suspect financial irregularities at Suncaster Bioworks?" "After Harrison publicly humiliated me at the company picnic. His behavior seemed designed to make me look incompetent before something bigger happened. That made me start investigating why he needed me to fail." "And what did your investigation reveal?" "That Harrison had created 18 fake companies over 2 years, stealing $800,000, and was planning to frame me for his crimes." The jury listened intently as I explained Harrison's systematic embezzlement, his preparation to flee with the money, his calculated destruction of my reputation. Harrison's lawyer attempted a desperate defense, claiming his client was mentally unstable, suffering from financial pressure, making poor decisions under stress. The prosecutor demolished these arguments with bank records showing Harrison's methodical planning, his sophisticated fraud techniques, his deliberate attempt to frame an innocent employee. After 3 days of testimony, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours, guilty on all counts. Judge Williams sentenced Harrison to 12 years in federal prison, full restitution of $800,000, and permanent prohibition from working in any financial capacity. As the bailiff led Harrison away in handcuffs, he finally looked at me. His expression wasn't angry or defiant. It was defeated, broken, the look of a man who'd destroyed everything through his own greed and arrogance. Harrison's fall was complete and devastating. His house was sold to pay restitution, his luxury cars, his boat, his investment portfolio, everything liquidated to compensate Suncaster for his theft. Diana moved to California with their children, changed their last names, started over in a place where Harrison's crimes wouldn't follow them. The business community that had once respected Harrison now used his case as a cautionary tale about corporate fraud. His former colleagues refused to speak with him. His country club revoked his membership. His professional licenses were permanently suspended. 6 months after his sentencing, I received permanent appointment as CEO of Suncaster Bioworks. The board had watched me rebuild the company's reputation, implement new financial safeguards, and restore employee confidence. Under my leadership, Suncaster had its most profitable quarter in company history. Tyler, now 6 years old, understood more about what had happened. The mean man tried to steal money and blame you for it, right, Daddy? That's right, buddy. But doing the right thing always wins in the end. Even when it takes a long time. Especially when it takes a long time. One evening I was working late in my office when I found an old photo from the company picnic, the day Harrison had humiliated me in front of my son and 50 families. I looked at Harrison's triumphant smile, remembering how confident he'd been that his plan would work. I put the photo in my desk drawer, not as a reminder of that painful day, but as proof that justice eventually finds those who abuse their power. Walking to my car that night, I thought about Tyler's question at the picnic. Why did he do that to you, Daddy? Harrison had done it because he thought he could get away with it, because he believed his position protected him from consequences, because he'd confused temporary power with permanent immunity. He'd learned the difference between those two things in federal court, wearing handcuffs, listening to a 12-year sentence. I drove home to Tyler, ready to help him with homework, make dinner, and continue building the life that Harrison had tried to destroy. The man who'd thought he could frame me for his crimes now spent his days in a federal prison cell, while I ran the company he'd nearly bankrupted. Harrison Webb faced the full consequences of his betrayal and theft. His 12-year prison sentence stripped away his freedom, while financial restitution destroyed his wealth and social standing. His wife divorced him to protect their children. His professional reputation was permanently ruined, and his former colleagues treated him as a cautionary tale about corporate greed. The man who'd tried to destroy my career through elaborate fraud lost everything he'd worked to build, spending his days in a federal prison cell while I led the company he'd attempted to loot. Sometimes the best revenge is simply letting someone's own actions lead them exactly where they deserve to go.